Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Iraq 911.
American combat troops are not going to be fighting in Iraq again. We do not have the ability to simply solve this problem by sending in tens of thousands of troops and committing the kinds of blood and treasure that has already been expended in Iraq. Ultimately, this is something that is going to have to be solved by the Iraqis.
Commander-in-Chief Obama announced this week that he will send 300 American advisors to Iraq to help the embattled Iraqi government plan operations to thwart the advance of ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Since launching an offensive in late May, ISIS has taken control of Iraq's second largest city and advanced to within 40 miles of Baghdad. Its goal is to create an independent, Sunni-dominated country spanning parts of Syria and Iraq governed by strict Islamic law. Mr. Obama also called on Prime Minister al-Maliki to create a national unity government that includes minority Sunnis and Kurds, as well as Iraq's Shiite majority, as a prelude to retaking control of western Iraq. The alternative, Iraq could descend into civil war, pitting its rival religious and ethnic groups against one another in a bloody conflict like that in neighboring Syria. For a long-term answer, Mr. Obama might have asked his Vice President Joe Biden. In 2006, then-Senator Biden proposed the partition of Iraq into 3 semi-autonomous regions, one for the Sunni-dominated West, one for the Kurdish North, and one for the Shiite-dominated South and East, but all within the same nation-state. Given the latest flare in violence, achieving that political resolution may be difficult. But if al-Maliki can create a national unity government that promises more autonomy to Iraq's minorities, the Iraqi army may be motivated to retake Mosul. Sunni tribal elders may turn against Islamic radicals, as they did in 2007 when al-Qaeda in Iraq dominated Anbar province. With American intelligence assistance and targeted strikes, a possibility Obama held out this week, pending congressional consultations, ISIS might then be driven out of Iraq. Question, how realistic is this scenario, and is Iraqi Prime Minister al-Maliki the leader to make it happen? Pat Buchanan.
John, I don't think we can put Humpty Dumpty together again, to be very honest. The American troops there and American air power can keep Baghdad secure from the Sunnis and from ISIL coming down from the north. But I don't think the government has the competence or ability to unite the people or get folks behind them. I don't think their army's got the capacity to march out and to capture Anbar and the Sunni Triangle and Kirkuk and Kurdistan again. So I think de facto you have a partition there, and the United States of America, you just heard Barack Obama say so, is not going to put in what would be required scores of thousands of American troops to bring this country together militarily. Now, should the country, do you think they'll decide to come together diplomatically? I doubt it. There's too much blood been shed. People have got their own measures of independence. The Kurds do, the Sunnis do. I think the reality is it has been broken apart and nobody's going to put it back together.
Is the goal to establish an independent Sunni state?
I think the goal of the Sunnis, all of them, including ISIL, is to be out from under Maliki and his regime, which they despise and detest, and they are supported in that by the Saudis, Qatar, the Gulf states.
If it is the goal, it won't work. Eleanor.
Well, anyone who grew up with the Vietnam generation, when you hear you're sending advisors in, you immediately get nervous. But I think it's pretty clear that the president is doing the least that he can do to try to assist in repelling ISIS from Baghdad. And the truth is that the Shiite military is probably going to be able to repel ISIS on its own from Baghdad. And if you look at the areas that ISIS has taken in Iraq, they're largely the Sunni heartland. And I agree with Pat, you've got basically a de facto partition that has already taken place. In fact, it began when President Bush was in office. Remember all the ethnic cleansing that went on then? Baghdad used to be a very integrated city. It's now 80% Shiite. Maliki doesn't care about the Sunni areas. There's a lot of desert area, and the city's full of Sunnis. And the Kurds are perfectly happy in their part of the country. But they are now jockeying to form a government. Maliki won the most seats in the election. He still stands a pretty good chance of emerging on top. And, you know, they don't have to love each other. They just have to quit actively killing each other. And if they don't decide to do that, I don't think American military power is not going to be able to prevent their civil war.
Right.
I think we've forgotten, John, that Maliki has been in power already since 2006. He's had 12 years to form a unity government. It hasn't happened. The policy in Washington for that time has been to discreetly arm him and pump more weapons into the hands of his dictator-style government that has enraged Sunnis in Iraq. The idea of a partition that was thrown around by Joe Biden and Leslie Gelb a decade ago, it may be a good idea then. At this point, we have to look at what that partition would mean. The oil wealth for Iraq is being exploited by American, British, and Chinese companies in the south in a Shiite-controlled area. The other potential oil wealth area is in the north, in Kurdistan. What the Sunnis control at this point is a stretch of desert without massive oil potential, without any oil potential. How are you going to break that wealth up evenly in a partitioned state that only inflames the divisions more than they already are? The reason that the momentum, while Democrats in the Senate years ago tried to embrace this plan in 2006, the reason there was never momentum for it was because polls at the time found the majority of Iraqis didn't want it.
Mark?
Well, I think we're in a very, very serious situation here because there are great strategic interests of the United States, in my judgment, at risk here. One of them is the whole issue of oil. And that is something that could really affect not only that region, but it could affect all the Western economies. So we just can't stand by and let this whole thing unravel in a way that really does threaten that whole region and its ability to work with us. So there are no easy answers to this thing. I don't think that it's going to be possible to reform all of these governments. There's just the conflict is so deep and so long, it's hard for me to imagine how the Shiites and the Sunnis get together. So it's not going to be an easy solution here, no matter what, and it's going to go on for a long time.
Okay, Cheney's history gloss. A broadside from former Vice President Cheney and his daughter Liz appeared on top of the opinion page in Wednesday's Wall Street Journal. Quote, in 1983, President Ronald Reagan said, "If history teaches us anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom," unquote. President Obama is on track to securing his legacy as the man who betrayed our past and squandered our freedom, unquote. Question is it unprecedented for a former vice president to criticize a sitting president like this? Is it below the belt, Eleanor Clift? Oh, I don't think he should be critiqued on that level. I think we should ask, though, why somebody who was so colossally wrong in 2003 expects to have any credibility today. His major beef with the administration is that they didn't keep a residual force in Iraq after the war ended at the end of 2011. Well, why didn't they? Because Iran was so empowered by the stupid invasion of Iraq that Iran told Maliki, "I don't want Americans in there," and Iran has much more sway over this government that our service people died for, and over a period of years. So, you know, I think Cheney is just off on some other planet, and he's gonna get his comeuppance from his own party. Listen to Rand Paul. Okay, here's Dick Cheney's verdict on Barack Obama. Quote, "The tragedy unfolding in Iraq today is only part of the story. Al-Qaeda and its affiliates are resurgent across the globe. According to a recent RAND study, between 2010 and 2013, there was a 58% increase in the number of Salafi jihadist terrorist groups around the world. In the face of this threat, Obama is busy ushering America's adversaries into positions of power in the Middle East. President Obama seems determined to leave office, ensuring he has taken America down a notch, unquote.
You think President Obama of dereliction of duty?
No, he's accusing him of failure, but the truth is that the war Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and the neocons brought to this country and put in place is coming to a disaster, and the disaster is occurring on the watch of Barack Hussein Obama. I don't think Obama's responsible for it. I do think the country agrees that we ought to get out of Afghanistan, we ought to get out of Iraq, we ought to stay out of Syria, we ought to stay out of Ukraine, but there's no doubt this is all coming down on his watch, John. But I think it's odd that they would try to blame Barack Obama for something he didn't start and something he tried to end.
It's not odd. It's opportunistic. He sees an opening to try to vindicate, again, the biggest strategic blunder that an American administration has made in memory when with that invasion of Iraq. Where does he think all these jihadists got created?
Exactly,
you know, U.S. invading a Muslim country started it off.
Cakewalk. It's going to be a cakewalk. They'll welcome us with flowers. You know, it's going to be a great model for the world.
It might be offensive that this came from Dick Cheney, somebody who basically profited immensely off of the American military adventurism in Iraq. There were, however, some interesting points in the Wall Street Journal op-ed that he did with his daughter, and one of them was this idea of spreading black flag-waving, Al-Qaeda, kill in the name of God jihadism that's really running through the middle of the situation in Iraq right now. And I will tell you, this administration has had a rhetorically soft posture, a difficult time explaining this. What they have done, though, is they've done an aggressive drone campaign over the last 5 years, remote-controlled missiles to kill suspected terrorists in Pakistan.
Have they killed more than they created? Have they killed more than they created?
We're going to move on.
It's a good question.
Hold on. This is the way the Wall Street Journal played it up. This is the top of the page, and it's devoted to Dick Cheney and his daughter Liz. Wednesday. It couldn't have been bigger, and it's probably a quasi-endorsement from the Journal. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I think, look, Dick Cheney, I respect the guy, I like him, he's a friend, he believes in what he did, he believes it was right, but from the beginning, John, I've thought it was wrong, and I think it's being proven out.
Okay, exit question. In an interview on CNN with Larry King 4 years ago, Vice President Joe Biden said Iraq should be one of the, quote, great achievements of the Obama administration, unquote. Is that still the case? Yes or no? Pat Buchanan.
That was naive and utopian then and remains so now.
Well, the president campaigned saying he was going to end wars. He ended the war. We're not going to start it up again. I wouldn't call it a great achievement, but I wouldn't lay the whole failure at Obama's feet.
Campaigning and saying you're going to end the war and actually ending a war are two different things. There are big responsibilities that come with pulling troops out of a region. There could have been some force left, whoever you want to blame, and we shouldn't be just responding by, we got our troops out, let's pump more weaponry into Iraq and arm the Iraqi government.
You think the American people want us to stay up?
I think the American people want us to stay out, but I also think the American people want the government to look at what is the real national security interest of being here. What can we do to help? And I credit the administration for having the discipline to try and push back against let's immediately militarize this.
You know the repercussions in our economy and the world economy because of the rising price of oil.
Of course.
You know, it's not going to help our economy. It's going to hurt our economy.
I'm worried about that as well.
Are you worried about that?
Yeah, I am worried about that, but I would go back to this question that you raised before in different terms. Frankly, the role of the president, if I may say so, was to deal with the national interests of the country. Whatever the campaign was, 2 years ago or 6 years ago, it's not the issue. He's the president of the United States. He has to protect the long-term national interests of the United States. We are now putting at risk one of our most important areas in the world, and that involves, of course, the world of oil. So this is something you just can't walk away from because you had a campaign, or even because the American public doesn't want it. This is the role of the president.
He's not walking,
Did the president, when he appeared at the UN, suggest that the role of the president of the United States was far bigger than the way you've explained it?
Yes.
He did?
Yes.
When he was there?
Yes.
It's a far bigger role.
Yes.